Hi everyone, thank you all for coming. And so, growing up, I had very little kind of impression or concept of a Southeast Asian identity. I thought of myself as Singaporean, but I also thought that Singapore was a city that preferred to align itself with other cities like London and New York and not the countries in this region. So, my family would go on holiday in the US, go to holiday in Europe, Japan, Australia, but, we never really went anywhere in Southeast Asia except for Malaysia because there was somehow this kind of impression that Southeast Asia, the other countries in Southeast Asia, were more dangerous, more corrupt than our very wealthy, comfortable Singapore. Thailand, for instance, existed in my family's imaginations as a place where children get kidnapped and then their limbs get chopped off and then they have to beg in the streets. And so we never went there because, my parents were worried about their 2 children. And so I was 21 years old before I actually got to go anywhere in Southeast Asia that wasn't Singapore or Malaysia. I went to Chiang Mai in Thailand for a workshop for Southeast Asian youth. As you can see, I didn't get kidnapped. I still have all my limbs. But what I did get was exposure to Southeast Asia and to other Southeast Asians. And after this workshop, a few months after this workshop, I went for a month-long trip to Laos, and then I also spent 2 weeks in the jungle on the Burmese-Thai border in Karen State. And through this, I started to learn about this region that had already been my home even before I recognized it as such. I realized that there were, even though there are a lot of things, a lot of areas in which we are different, there are so many areas in which we are the same, or there are similarities that we all can relate to. There are so many issues that we are grappling with in our own way, whether it's inequality, free speech, press freedom, the environment and conservation, or even the rhetoric around drugs that leads us to having the death penalty for drug traffickers. In fact, last night I found out that an Indonesian journalist and documentary filmmaker, Danny Dwi Laksono, had been reported to the police for defamation because of comments he made about a politician on his Facebook page. I'm sure we all find this a very familiar scenario. And so that's Indonesia, but we recognize it in Singapore, we recognize it in Malaysia. Someone tweeted me and said, I thought this story was from Myanmar at first. So we all know this reality. And New Naratif wants to explore these connections. We want to connect the different countries. We want to show that no country in this region is alone in its struggles, and that there's a lot that we can learn from each other. But to do that, we first need to know more about each other. And that's what we hope to do with our stories. But we're also not interested in just connecting the countries. We actually want to connect the people as well, across the different fields of expertise and across the different experiences. So for me, the seed of New Naratif actually dates all the way back to 2012, 2013, when PJ first got in touch with me and he said, can we talk on Skype? And I was a little bit surprised because we didn't actually know each other that well. I think at that point we hadn't even met face to face. I was in the UK doing my master's when he had come back to Singapore and did all the research that he told you about just now. And then he was back in Oxford and I was in Scotland. And so it was kind of like, we've never met. What does the revisionist historian want with me? and so we did Skype, and he talked about how there was a lot of great research and data and information about Southeast Asia out there, but it wasn't reaching people because they were either in paywalls and you had to subscribe to academic journals to get to them, or else even if they were free and on academia.edu, it would be in such dense language that only other academics would want to be interested in reading them. And so he had an idea of building a site that would make this information more accessible to more people, and he just wanted to get kind of some thoughts from me as a journalist on how that could be possible. So I suggested, why don't you partner journalists and academics and researchers and use the data that they have to kind of tell these stories and give it a more human interest spin so that it's not, so much that staid academic style. And he said, okay, I'll think about it, and I didn't hear from him for a while. And now 5 years later, we are standing here to tell you about New Naratif, which has been built upon that vague idea that 2 Singaporeans shared while freezing our butts off in respective corners of the UK, trying to figure out how to make a difference at home. So New Naratif seeks to connect people across different disciplines so that we can learn from each other and build on our strengths. And this will be reflected in the stories that we do. We're not interested in being part of that 24-hour news cycle, which focuses more on events and spectacle, rather than the context, the development, or growth, as you've heard from Julia just now. We want to go deeper into the issues that Southeast Asia deals with. We want to bring stories that really give you a feel of what it's like on the ground, so you can, feel the sights and sounds and feel the emotions of the people on the ground. We want to highlight people who are working to make things better for their country and for their region, and to provide space for everyone to engage in the debate and discussion that can help us seek solutions, rather than churn out news articles that get the eyeballs and everyone reads and shares and says this is terrible, and then everybody feels a bit drained and depressed after that, but no one really knows what to do. And so, as a platform, we will have to be necessarily subjective. We have principles that matter to us, of equality, of inclusion. And we also believe that every writer, editor, photographer, or artist who contributes to us, who works with us, will have their own biases that seep into their work. And so we cannot promise objective reporting. We do not promise, and we do not want to promise objective reporting. But we do promise honest, evidence-based reporting. We do promise the openness so that our members and our readers can see where each contributor is coming from, engage in discussions, and make up their own mind. Our contributors themselves may or may not actually be citizens of Southeast Asian nations, because we don't want to define someone's inclusion in this region according to the color of their passports. But all of these contributors will be rooted in and have a deep love for the region. We're not interested in parachute journalism, where someone is just flown in for a few days and then expected to write a story as if they've lived in that place for their whole lives. We believe that there's so much talent in this region that parachute journalism is not only unnecessary, actually counterproductive. So we'd rather devote our energies to building this platform and this space for writers, artists who are already in this region to develop and to grow. And to tell you more about that, I'd just like to introduce our next speaker, Sunny Liu. I don't really know why I need to introduce him. I'm sure everybody knows him. And he will tell you more about what it's like for Southeast Asian artists who perhaps have not yet met their own Charlie Chan.